Trade Center. Now, the airlines, strange and interesting, was United Airlines and American Airlines. They didn't do anything with Delta. They didn't do anything with AirTran. Virgin Atlantic? Nope, nope, nope. But don't believe me. Listen to what ABC News does, and then listen to family members. First, we'll start with, these are family members who wanted this investigated and were told it couldn't be. So here you go.
We were told it had to do with national security. They couldn't tell us. So if it had to do with, it had to do with the Moussaoui trial. So they couldn't address the questions. And to get the standard Polito-speak from every one of these meetings was frustrating. And inevitably, someone would start banging the table. Someone would raise their voice.
And I truly lost my temper. I just said, what is this crap that you're talking about? And we brought up the put options.
Federal officials have begun a major investigation into whether someone, or many people, benefited financially from the evil done to the country last Tuesday. Not long before the attacks occurred, there were some financial transactions in the stock market that may indicate knowledge of the attack before it began.
The week prior to 9/11, there were puts on the airlines. And it wasn't just all the airlines, it was on American and United, which meant you were betting that those airlines' stock prices would go down.
The trades are called puts, and they involved at least 450,000 shares of American. But what raised the red flag is more than 80% of the orders were puts, far outnumbering call options, those betting the stock would rise. Sources say they've never seen that kind of imbalance before. After the terrorist attacks, American Airlines stock price obviously did fall. According to our sources, that translated into well over $5 million total profit for the person or persons who bet the stock would fall.
One example, United Airlines. The Thursday before the attack, more than 2,000 contracts betting that the stock would go down were purchased, 90 times more in one day than in 3 weeks. When the markets reopened, United stock dropped. The price of the contracts soared, and someone may have made a lot of money fast.
$180,000 turns into $2.4 million when that plane hits the World Trade Center.
Altogether, at least 7 countries are dissecting suspicious trades that may have netted more than $100 million in profits.
And there's much more, including an extraordinarily high number of bets against Morgan Stanley and Marsh & McLennan, 2 of the World Trade Center's biggest tenants.
Merrill Lynch was involved, and I said, Merrill Lynch's stock was 48 the day before 9/11, and I said the next day it was down to 41. This is kind of fishy. I said, suddenly, you have these 2 major airlines, and their stock go down, they go down tremendously, and somebody's making lots of money off of 9/11.
And the answer that we got was, we've investigated, and we find no unusual trading activity.
Could this be a coincidence? This would be one of the most extraordinary coincidences in the history of mankind if it was a coincidence.
It is absolutely unprecedented to see cases of insider trading covering the entire world, from Japan, the United States, and North America to Europe.
So now you heard what family members heard. They knew, and even your television reported, that someone had pre-knowledge, and all of a sudden 90 times more put options, okay? 1,000, 1,200 compared to 200, and 200 was the average for 3 days, not 1 day. But it's rather interesting. Someone put options on. So here you go. Here's another piece, just so you see, the insider trading aspect of it. Here's a little bit more on the insider trading. Maybe you can learn about what companies it was that actually did the trading.
I mean, for example, if the major media knew that people profited because they had foreknowledge of the 9/11 attacks, I mean, that's a story with some legs, no? But that's where it gets funny, because the major media does know that, for instance, 6 times the average number of put options were placed on United Airlines stock, while no similar trend was seen with other airlines. Morgan Stanley, Dean Witter, and Merrill Lynch, companies that occupied 22 floors of the World Trade Center, each 2 tall buildings that came crashing down at free fall speed on September 11th, also saw their stock price plummet post 9/11. A put option is a way for people to make money when a stock loses its price. Morgan Stanley, which normally averages about 80 put options in any 3-day period, saw 2,157 put options placed on its stock in the 3 days leading up to September 11th, 2001. Merrill Lynch saw over 12,000 put options placed on its stock in the 4 days leading up to 9/11, up from an average of 252 a day. Someone knew something, but who? But how? One of the banks placing and profiting from these put options was A.B. Brown, the American arm of the international giant Deutsche Bank. Funny thing is, you don't have to connect too many dots. The executive director of the CIA on September 11, 2001 was a dude named Buzzy Krongard. Before joining the CIA, Buzzy worked in the private sector, most recently as the CEO of, you guessed it, A.B. Brown. Of course, I'm only scratching the surface here. Exhaustive research has been done not by the major media, and I posted some of those links in the sidebar of this video.
Rather interesting that this wraps around the Central Intelligence Agency, yeah. Who was that Buzzy Krongard? Who is A.B. Brown? Maybe you broker people out there want to tell us. Rather interesting, huh? Yeah. Well, here's another little piece, because, you know, what I found interesting was the SEC, when someone put a Freedom of Information request in, they said that that information was destroyed.
All right, well, let's move along to story number 2.
Story number 2 has been a large story in the alternative media for the past few days, and this was one that it took me a little bit to try and figure out what the new angle on this story was. But we're going to take this from Washington's blog. The SEC, that's the Securities and Exchange Commission, says government destroyed documents regarding pre-9/11 put options. So let's jump back to almost 9 years ago, September 19th, 2001. CBS News reported, sources tell CBS News, that the afternoon before the attack, alarm bells were sounding over unusual trading in the U.S. stock options market. An extraordinary number of trades were betting that American Airlines stock prices would fall. The trades are called puts, and on and on. And again, folks, before we even dive further into this, we'll provide a lot of the contextual links for you to do more research, most definitely to historycommons.org and their complete 9/11 timeline. But if we scroll down a ways, and Washington's blog is great giving all the information, all the backstories, and it goes through a lot of the firms and other companies and economic and otherwise looking into the insider trading, the pre-9/11 insider trading. So what gets to the heart of the matter is, jumping down, as we mentioned, the effort to track down the source of these puts was quite substantial. And what were the results and details of the investigation? Apparently we'll never know. Specifically, David Callahan, executive editor of Smart CEO, submitted a Freedom of Information Act request to the SEC regarding the pre-9/11 put options, and the SEC responded, and MaxKaiser.com has the scan of the letter, and quoting the SEC, this letter is in response to your request seeking access to and copies of documentary evidence referred to in footnote 130 of Chapter 5 of the September 11th 9/11 Commission report. We have been advised that the potentially responsive records have been destroyed. James, what's your take on this?
Wow, extremely important and sensitive documents relating to the most important event in the last few decades of the political life of America have been destroyed. I wonder why that is. Absolutely, this, as I think my listeners will know and your listeners will know, the 9/11 inside trading story is an extremely important one, and one that we should be looking into and trying to get more information about. So my hat's off to everyone who's making Freedom of Information Act requests on this topic. Even if they are fruitless. But certainly it's just such an important topic, and I still continue to discover more and more about this. We already know so much about how the systems in the World Trade Center were being used on that day to funnel money out the back doors via various computer programs and things, and this relates to things like whistleblowers, Richard Grove and Indira Singh we're talking about. We also know that there were companies hired in the wake of the disaster to go through the hard drives that were collected from the rubble and to try to find out about what was going on in the World Trade Center computer-wise in the minutes and hours before the collapse, and I have a video up on my YouTube channel about that I would suggest people check out. It's just so much information continues to come out on this extremely important topic. Follow the money. So definitely people need to be looking into this story. And
I know you probably wouldn't believe me if I told you, but once again, you can check out, do your own due diligence. So now you find out that someone profited from 9/11.